Hello, this is Alexis May for AI Med. I'm very pleased to be speaking today with a special guest, Dr. Michael Brooks, a practicing emergency medicine doctor, data scientist, and entrepreneur. Michael, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
It's great to have an opportunity to talk to someone who brings together the clinical, data science, business expertise. Just to kick things off, I'd be really interested to hear a little bit about your background and how you came to be where you are at the moment.
So I'm an emergency physician by background. I trained in and qualified as a doctor about just over 10 years ago. And when I was working initially as a junior doctor on the wards, I noticed there was quite a lot of situations where there was patient harm being caused by the way we handled data. So things like test results that went missing because the slips of paper that they were printed on just disappeared, to being unable to read a patient's care plan because it was handwritten on paper, I even sat there as a doctor in clinic, offering follow-up appointments, providing follow-up appointments for patients, and some would turn up and we just didn't have the paper folder with us. So you would have to essentially hash your way through this 15-20 minute appointment with them that they've been waiting 6 months for. And all you could do was retake the history and basically repeat work that had already been done. And meanwhile, the patient was no further along their care journey. They felt very frustrated with it, and I'm sure that caused harm. But the Sentinel event really was when we had a 50-something-year-old gentleman who had come to us because of a type of small bleed around the lining of the brain called a subarachnoid hemorrhage. And we had to perform a couple of investigations to see the cause of this bleed. The most common cause of this kind of bleed is a little aneurysm that can go pop. And it's quite important, if you have this type of bleed, that you have a solid idea of whether an aneurysm is there or not. We'd done a CT scan that was essentially inconclusive. So we had to escalate to a more detailed test called an angiogram, which is an invasive test. And the problem with this test is it does carry a risk of causing a stroke. And I was asked to consent this chap, did all the paperwork with him, and he was quite reasonable. I told him I think that his risk of a stroke was 1%, but risk of death from a missed aneurysm at the time was about 40%. So it was highly in his interest to have this test. Anyway, he went down to the angio suite, he had the test, and the radiologist at the time wrote the report on a reporting sheet of paper. The patient then came back up to the ward, and then the following day we had a ward round, and I was asked, what did this angiogram show? And I opened the paper folder to the section that was where the investigation results were, and it was empty. The piece of paper had gone missing. So I was sent on a goose chase to retrace all the steps to try and find this piece of paper. I couldn't find it anywhere. I looked in every trolley, bottom of every trolley, every drawer, went down to the angio suite, asked the radiologist if they would kindly re-report it, and was told that actually the tape that the images had been recorded on had now been recorded over, because in those days it was an analog system. And so we just had to repeat the test. And so I sat down, did the consent form again, same risk and benefits, 1% risk of stroke, 40% risk of a missed aneurysm causing death. The patient was quite understanding, actually. I was fed some slightly dishonest lines to tell him. I was told to tell him we did not get the results we wanted, which is not entirely true. The truth is we lost a piece of paper. Anyway, so he signed the consent form. He said, just make sure you go back through the same wounds that we make. We didn't want any more holes in him. And that following day, he went down for the repeat test. And you can guess what happened this time. So he stroked. And the last I saw of him is he went from being a 50-something with nothing more than a headache, and a fairly mild headache, to being somebody profoundly disabled in a wheelchair, unable to talk, unable to use the right side of his body. So that led me to believe that there had to be a better way. And it was quite clear that the government's national effort to put together an electronic patient record system was going to fail. So because I couldn't, in all consciousness, continue practicing in what I believed was a fundamentally broken system without at least doing something about it, I thought I would set up a company to try and sort the way we handled data out properly. Perhaps naively at the time, because I thought that it's not a terribly difficult problem to see, and it's not to solve. So we went in with the objective of building something that was primarily focused on capturing patients' healthcare information, allowing doctors, nurses to collaborate. And we really focused on the frontline need and on trying to build in patient safety features. The idea was, if you make something ridiculously easy and natural to use for doctors and nurses, they will use it in preference to paper. And then therefore all these patient safety benefits you can build in, such as checking your medication doses, will just be naturally implemented. So that was quite a few years ago. And on that journey, I've learned a lot about the various systems that we're using, that we've built our solution on. I've also learned a lot about the way the healthcare system in the UK and overseas buys technology, the decisions it makes, how it makes those decisions, and also a lot about the specifics of the technology we use and the data that we capture, and how it can be used for things like forecasting demands, clinical decision assistance, etc. All the while, I've carried on working as a clinician, but part-time, on a part-time role. So I've been riding these two horses now for about 8 years. So it's been interesting to see how medicine and technology combine and how they can combine. And it's the carrot there, the benefits are pretty obvious, not just to me. It's now just finding a way of us to get those benefits live in hospitals in place.
Thanks, Michael, for sharing that really fascinating story. You mentioned something which chimes with what we've been hearing a lot from our global community of clinicians in terms of the sort of clinical user interface, which isn't, it's probably fair to say, always particularly straightforward and simple to use, and is in itself potentially a barrier to implementation. What's your take on that?
I mean, I think absolutely. I think you probably were too kind to healthcare there. I think you just need to pick up The Digital Doctor by Robert Wachter, and it says in black and white the issues with a lot of clinical systems. For a start, a lot of hospitals are on paper. Those that have digitized, they've gone and put in systems that were quite clearly designed by somebody who'd never touched a patient. And that's your problem. A lot of the systems that are in place, even in the UK, are American systems that have been, to some certain extent, anglicized. And they were all invented for the purpose of capturing billing data, all about how you bill the insurer, itemizing the costs. And the healthcare aspects were very much an afterthought. And even now we have hospitals where NHS clinicians spend half their time dismissing screens that say, how will this patient pay? And then the teams that build these systems equally haven't been out there on the wards seeing patients. So they don't inherently appreciate what's important, the time pressures clinicians have. And I think that means that what gets implemented, what gets actually built, is often a bit wide of the mark. The net result is that doctors and nurses generally hate using systems. The quality, the caliber of most clinical systems is diabolical. We shouldn't, when we have got such immense pressures on patients. In the case of A&E, I need to make sure that every patient I see is out the department within 4 hours, either by admission or discharge or transfer. I cannot afford 2 minutes to go dismissing various dialogue boxes and navigating through trees to get to common options. I just don't have that time. And any minute I spend in front of the computer, that's time lost to the system. That's time that I could have otherwise been at that patient's bedside asking another question, examining them or reassuring them. And that can potentially be a source of patient harm. So it's pretty clear out there that a lot of the systems are commissioned by people who don't work on the front line. They're designed by people who've never touched a patient. And the net result is that doctors and nurses are given things, usually have systems foisted upon them that don't really help their day-to-day care, that consume more time that they could otherwise spend at the bedside, and generally make their life harder. Net result is you have to spend hours, if not days, training people on these systems. They're not engaged with very well. People take shortcuts to try and make their lives easier. So they'll skip fields. They'll put any mandatory fields, they'll just put a dot in just to fill it up rather than actually put useful data in, so they can get back to the bedside. And that's a failure. If your doctors and nurses aren't embracing the thing, you're not going to get good quality data, which means that you're going to get garbage. You're also going to detract away from bedside time with a patient. Patient dissatisfaction is pretty high when the doctor's just is away looking at a computer rather than talking to them. So, bad user interface is incredibly costly. And to fix it isn't difficult. You just simply need to look at what doctors and nurses are doing, what they do in their day-to-day life, what they do in their workflows. You need to see all the places that there's duplication of information, which is a lot, and remove those because you can do that on a computer system. Take away unnecessary clicks, unnecessary steps, automate as much as possible, and then display the information in a way that's natural, apparent, and resembles perhaps what they might have done in the paper world, because the paper world ended up having forms of a certain layout because that's what was most convenient for doctors and nurses. But in digital, this isn't difficult stuff. It's just incredible that so few clinical IT systems start off with a doctor and a nurse communicating their need and working with software developers. So in our world at my company, PatientSource, we have software developers and doctors and nurses in the same room, or virtually in the same virtual room, and they collaborate together to help design the various modules that we have. We then put that out to a wider set of beta tester doctors and nurses. We get feedback, we improve upon what we've got, and you quite rapidly get to a point where you've now got a ready module ready to release. It's not difficult to do this, it's just not very many people are.
Thanks, Michael. I think that your words will resonate really strongly with our community. That's all the time that we've got today, but thanks so much for joining us. And thanks to everyone for watching. Please do make sure to like, share, subscribe, and keep an eye on ai-med.io for more AI Med talks soon.